In 2017, Mercedes promised the world a miracle, a $2.7 million hypercar powered by genuine Formula One technology, so radical that only 275 people could ever hope to own one. The headlines celebrated a new era, but behind Mercedes-AMG's bold claim lurked impossible engineering hurdles and mounting risks for buyers. What went so wrong with this ambition that few dare to discuss it, even now? Spotlight swept across the show floor as the curtain dropped at the 2017 Frankfurt Motor Show. Mercedes-AMG's Project One stood alone, flanked by engineers in silver jackets and a sea of camera flashes. The promise was simple but staggering. A streetcar powered by the very heart of a Formula One champion. The crowd pressed closer, drawn by the roar of a turbocharged V6 and the electric whir of hybrid motors. On stage, executives spoke of a new era, one where Formula One technology would escape the confines of the racetrack and conquer city streets. The car's spec sheet read like something out of a fever dream. 1.6 liters, over 1,000 horsepower, revving past 11,000 revolutions per minute, all borrowed from the engine that carried Lewis Hamilton to the top of the podium. Only 275 would ever be built. The price was $2.7 million. The slogan, "The Formula One car for the road," hung above the display, echoed in every headline and whispered in every corner of the hall. Journalists jostled for a closer look, their voices rising with disbelief and envy. Buyers, many already on Mercedes's VIP list, circled with intent. Some scribbled signatures on intent forms, others snapped photos of the titanium exhausts and carbon fiber wings. The sense of anticipation was electric. This wasn't just a car, it was a declaration. Mercedes wasn't aiming to match rivals like Ferrari or McLaren, they were rewriting the rules. For a brief moment, all doubts faded. The future of performance had arrived, and it wore the AMG badge. Demand for the AMG One far outstripped its limited supply. Mercedes capped production at just 275 cars, each carrying a price tag of around $2.72 million before taxes and options. Invitations were sent to a select group of high-net-worth clients, collectors, motorsport insiders, and long-standing Mercedes patrons. For these buyers, the process started with a formal invitation, followed by a substantial deposit to secure an allocation. The exact deposit amounts were never disclosed publicly, but in the hypercar world, sums often reach into the hundreds of thousands, non-refundable, and tied to the promise of eventual delivery. Every allocation was spoken for within weeks of the car's reveal. Some buyers viewed it as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to own a piece of Formula One history, while others saw the AMG One as a blue-chip investment, betting that scarcity and the Mercedes badge would guarantee long-term value. The exclusivity was so absolute that even some hopeful, very important people found themselves on waiting lists or forced to negotiate with existing allocation holders. The financial commitment went beyond the initial deposit. Buyers were expected to make staggered payments as the project moved forward, with the final balance due before delivery. Throughout years of uncertainty, their money remained locked in, exposed to the risk that the car might never arrive or might not live up to its original promise. For many, the anticipation was part of the appeal, proof of belonging to an ultra-elite club, and a test of patience few could afford. The stakes weren't just emotional or reputational. For 275 buyers, millions of dollars were on the line, tied to a dream that was still years from reality. The promise of a Formula One engine for the street came with a challenge no one could ignore. The way a Formula One power unit behaves is fundamentally incompatible with daily driving. At the heart of the issue was idle speed. In a Formula One car, the 1.6-liter V6 does not even begin to settle until it is spinning at 5,000 revolutions per minute. That is where the engine finds stability, where the oil flows, where the pneumatic valves do their work. But on the road, A car needs to idle quietly at less than 1,300 revolutions per minute, sometimes in heavy traffic, sometimes on a cold morning. Getting the AMG One's engine to drop from 5,000 revolutions per minute all the way down to 1,280 revolutions per minute was not just a matter of software. It demanded a complete rethinking of how the engine breathes, how it manages heat, and how every moving part copes with stress at low speeds. To keep the V6 alive at such low revs, Mercedes engineers turned to pneumatic valve springs, a technology borrowed straight from the race paddock. In Formula One, these systems allow the engine to scream past 11,000 revolutions per minute without the risk of valve float. But at idle, the same system is on the edge of stalling, struggling to maintain enough pressure to keep the valves moving in perfect time. Every second, the engine risks misfire or stalling, a problem that does not exist on the racetrack, where engines never drop below their comfort zone. The turbocharged V6 needed to be tamed for the street, but not neutered. The red line was set at 11,000 revolutions per minute, staggering for a road car, but still well below the 15,000 revolutions per minute of its Formula One sibling. Even so, the process of lowering the idle speed took years of recalibration at Brixworth, home of Mercedes-AMG high-performance powertrains. Engineers rewrote control software, adjusted fueling strategies, and re-engineered ancillaries to coax the engine into behaving at suburban speeds. Each adaptation came with trade-offs. The lower idle made the car street legal, but it also dulled the razor-sharp character that made the engine legendary in Formula One. This was not a simple transplant. It was a mechanical negotiation, with every compromise threatening either the engine's reliability or its soul. The AMG One's power plant stands as a technical marvel, but beneath the numbers is a story of constant tension between what is possible on the racetrack and what is required on the open road. Regulations for road cars in Europe are not suggestions. They are hard boundaries that even the most ambitious engineering projects cannot ignore. For the AMG One, the biggest obstacles came in the form of emissions and durability requirements, which demanded hardware changes no Formula One team would ever consider. Every production car sold in the European Union must pass the worldwide harmonized light vehicles test procedure and real driving emission cycles, a battery of tests designed to measure pollutants like nitrogen oxides and particulates under both laboratory and real-world driving conditions. These tests are far stricter than the standards that governed supercars just a decade ago, and they leave little room for compromise. The Formula One-derived V6 was never designed to meet civilian emissions laws. Race engines run rich, burn hot, and push the limits of combustion chemistry for maximum power, while emissions hardware is heavy, restrictive, and fundamentally at odds with performance. To comply, Mercedes was forced to fit the AMG One with gasoline particulate filters and larger catalytic converters. These components trap harmful particles and convert toxic gases, but they also add weight, increase back pressure, and change the sound and character of the exhaust. In practice, this meant the exhaust system had to be redesigned from the ground up, with new routing and packaging to fit the road car's tighter, more insulated bodywork. Durability posed another non-negotiable hurdle. European law requires that emission systems function for at least 50,000 kilometers, about 31,000 miles. Formula One engines are built for a handful of races, sometimes lasting only a few thousand kilometers before a full rebuild. For the AMG One, Mercedes had to reinforce components, upgrade cooling, and validate the entire powertrain through extended testing cycles. Bench tests ran engines for days at a time, simulating years of stop-start traffic, cold starts, and long highway cruises. Failures meant re-engineering parts that, in their original Formula One context, would have been discarded after a single weekend. Noise regulations added another layer of complexity, mandating mufflers and resonators that further dulled the engine's sharp edge. The result was a powertrain that looked and sounded like a Formula One engine on paper, but carried the scars of every compromise demanded by the law. Each addition, whether filter, catalyst, or muffler, was a reminder that the road is governed by rules no amount of ambition can outpace. Hybrid technology transformed the AMG One into more than a supercar. It became a rolling experiment in control systems. Beneath its sculpted shell, electric motors and control units worked alongside a turbocharged V6, each component demanding precise orchestration. The promise was Formula One performance, but the reality was a software puzzle that pushed even experienced engineers to their limits. Central to this challenge were MGUH, Motor Generator Unit Heat, and MGUK, Motor Generator Unit Kinetic. The MGUH captured energy from the turbocharger's exhaust, spinning the turbo electrically to erase lag and reclaim waste heat. The MGUK harvested braking energy and delivered instant torque to the rear wheels. In Formula One, these systems are managed by teams with live telemetry and custom maps for every lap. For the AMG One, all that expertise had to be embedded in a single car, ready to adapt to any road, any driver, without a pit crew. The software engineers in Affalterbach faced an unprecedented task. They had to create 6 distinct drive modes, each blending electric and gasoline power in unique ways, while keeping the system within strict thermal windows. The battery needed to stay at 50 degrees Celsius for optimal output. Inverters juggled energy between 4 electric motors, a high-voltage battery, and the combustion engine. Each mode required its own calibration, one for silent city driving, another for maximum attack on the track, and several in between. Every map had to consider emissions, noise, and unpredictable public roads. Translating Formula One hands-on management into automated fail-safe software meant rewriting how the car understood power, heat, and energy recovery. In Formula One, a driver might switch maps on command. In the AMG One, the car itself had to anticipate traffic, temperature swings, and driver inputs. The hybrid system's thermal window was so narrow that a few degrees off could trigger limp-home mode, cutting power to protect the hardware. Years went into coding, simulation, and validation. Even then, the system sometimes refused full power if conditions were not perfect. The result is a car that shifts from silent electric to an all-wheel drive hybrid at a button's touch. A feat only possible through relentless software refinement and the unseen work of engineers. Engines screamed behind thick glass as the dyno cell doors sealed tight. In early 2020, the Brixworth test benches became a battleground for the AMG One's hybrid powertrain. Engineers monitored screens in silence, watching as the 1.6-liter V6 and its electric partners cycled through simulated city commutes and highway pulls. On paper, every component had been fortified for the realities of the road. In practice, the system was running out of margin. One by one, failures surfaced. Reports from the dyno floor noted unexplained shutdowns, sometimes after hours, sometimes within minutes. Bearings in the turbocharger's MGUH unit showed signs of thermal stress. Sensors flagged temperature spikes in the after-treatment system, forcing emergency stops. Each incident triggered a fresh round of diagnostics. Engineers tore down subsystems, logging wear patterns and searching for root causes. The hybrid battery's cooling loop, designed to keep cells at 50 degrees Celsius, struggled to maintain stability under repeated charge and discharge cycles. In several runs, the software failed to coordinate energy flows, causing the system to default to limp mode. The bench logs filled with error codes, each one a clue to a deeper incompatibility between racing hardware and road expectations. By spring, the setbacks were impossible to ignore. Internal schedules slipped as parts were sent back for redesign. A failed turbo bearing here, a misbehaving inverter there. Each problem demanded weeks of rework. Whispered frustration grew among the test cell teams, many of whom had spent years perfecting these same systems for Formula One. The difference was stark. In racing, failures meant a quick swap and a fresh component for the next weekend. For the AMG One, every breakdown threatened the promise of a 50,000-kilometer lifespan. Rumors spread of a quiet stop work order on certain subsystems as engineers regrouped. The project's confidence, so high at launch, gave way to a new sense of urgency. Each missed target on the bench meant another delay for buyers, another round of awkward updates from Mercedes headquarters. The technical dream of a Formula One car for the road was colliding with the hard limits of physics and time. In the control rooms and workshops, hope was replaced by a grinding determination to find solutions, even as the timeline stretched and patience wore thin. The story of the AMG One was no longer just about innovation. It was about survival. By the start of 2021, the AMG One project had entered a phase that few outside the industry ever hear about. It was a year-long grind at the boundary of software and hardware. The engine and hybrid system, now physically adapted for the road, still refused to behave the way Mercedes needed. The car's promise depended on a level of digital control that had never been attempted on a street vehicle. Every subsystem, engine, electric motors, battery, and inverters relied on software maps to coordinate power, emissions, and thermal loads. These maps were not just a few lines of code. They were the invisible threads stitching together 1,000 moving parts, each with its own quirks and demands. Teams of calibration engineers at Affalterbach and Brixworth worked around the clock, sometimes in 12-hour shifts. Their task sounded simple: make the AMG One drive like a Mercedes on city streets, yet unleash its Formula One soul on the track. In practice, it was a marathon of trial and error. Each drive mode, 6 in total, needed its own calibration. EV for silent all-electric starts, Race Plus for maximum attack, and everything in between. Every mode had to handle cold mornings, traffic jams, and sudden bursts of speed, all while keeping emissions and noise within legal bounds. The hybrid system's thermal window was razor thin. The battery wanted to stay at 50 degrees Celsius. The engine needed to be hot enough for clean combustion, but not so hot that it triggered limp home mode. If any sensor reported a value out of range, the system would cut power or shut down entirely. Engineers spent weeks rewriting code to juggle these competing needs. One update would smooth out low-speed drivability, only to cause a spike in emissions. Another would fix emissions but introduce a delay in throttle response. Progress came in inches, not miles. By mid-2021, the calibration teams were still fighting software bugs that would not show up until the 100th test cycle. At times, the car would refuse to start after a night in the cold. On other days, it would run perfectly for hours, only to throw an error on a final run. The control maps swelled to thousands of lines, each tweak painstakingly logged and cross-checked. The engineers' work was invisible to outsiders, yet absolutely essential. Without it, the AMG One would never pass regulatory tests, let alone deliver on its promise to buyers. The delays were no longer caused by hardware failures or missing parts. Instead, they were measured in the number of calibration cycles, the hours spent in front of laptops, and the relentless search for a magic combination that would satisfy both the law and the legend. For the software teams, 2021 became a test of endurance, a marathon with no finish line in sight. In June 2022, the Mercedes-AMG One finally stepped into the spotlight as a finished product, 3 years behind the original schedule. The official unveiling was not just a press release, it was a carefully staged admission that the marathon was nearly over. Executives from Affalterbach and Brixworth, including Chief Executive Officer Philip Schiemer, stood by the production car as cameras rolled and journalists fired off questions about the delays. The car's silhouette was instantly recognizable: but the details told a story of countless revisions, new exhaust outlets, reworked cooling ducts, and a cockpit that balanced race car minimalism with the demands of the street. Behind the scenes, teams had spent months preparing for this moment, knowing that every detail would be scrutinized by buyers who had waited half a decade. The production line itself, set up in Coventry in partnership with Multimatic, began assembling the first customer cars in August 2022. Each AMG One required over 50 specialists to complete, moving through 16 assembly and testing stations. The process was more akin to building a prototype than a mass-produced vehicle. Engines arrived from Brixworth, already bench-tested for hours, before being mated to their hybrid systems under strict quality controls. Every car underwent a full shakedown on a rolling road, simulating city streets and track conditions alike. It was only after passing these tests that the car could be signed off for delivery. The sense of relief among the program's leadership was palpable, but so was the awareness that expectations had shifted. The world had changed since 2017. Rivals like Aston Martin and Ferrari had released their own hybrid supercars. The hypercar market had become even more crowded, and electrification was no longer a novelty. Yet, the AMG One still promised something no rival could match: a true Formula One-derived powertrain, now proven to work, however imperfectly, on public roads. For customers, the June 2022 unveiling and the August 2022 start of production represented tangible progress. Mercedes sent out updated schedules and issued statements confirming that all 275 units would be built, with deliveries staggered over the following months. Some buyers, who had grown used to vague updates and shifting timelines, now saw their cars take shape in real time. But beneath the surface, years of frustration lingered. The delays had cost more than just time. They had tested the faith of even the most loyal collectors. The AMG One was no longer just a technical experiment. It had become a test of patience, trust, and the limits of automotive ambition. A letter in a sleek envelope. A wire transfer receipt with more zeros than most people see in a lifetime. That's how it began for every AMG One buyer. A moment of excitement, a promise sealed by a deposit that could buy a house in any major city. For some, the money left their accounts in late 2017, with the expectation that a car would follow in 2 years' time. But as the calendar pages turned, anticipation gave way to a different kind of waiting. Months stretched into years. The original delivery window of 2019 came and went. Buyers received polite updates, sometimes nothing more than a few paragraphs explaining that the engineering was still ongoing, that perfection took time. Each message stopped short of real answers. For collectors used to rare Ferraris or McLarens, delayed gratification was nothing new. But the AMG One was different. The deposit, often rumored to be in the hundreds of thousands, non-refundable, was not just a placeholder. It was a commitment, a leap of faith in Mercedes' ability to deliver something never attempted before. Some owners began to wonder if they would ever see the car at all. Forums filled with speculation. Emails to AMG went unanswered or returned with vague reassurances. The longer the silence, the more the uncertainty grew. A few buyers tried to sell their allocations, hoping to recover their investment or even turn a profit. But the secondary market was nervous. Who wanted to buy a promise with no clear end date? Others resigned themselves to the wait, their money locked away while the world changed around them. For those who had planned to drive the car, the years of delay meant missed milestones, birthdays, anniversaries, even the end of a racing career. For some, the AMG One was supposed to be a crown jewel, a car to be enjoyed while they were still young enough to appreciate it. Instead, it became a lesson in patience. The frustration was not just about money. It was about trust. Mercedes, a brand built on engineering certainty, had asked its most loyal customers to believe in a vision that kept slipping further out of reach. The occasional press release promised that everything was on track. But for those who had wired their deposits years before, the reality was a string of delays and a growing sense that the dream might never materialize. Yet even as doubts mounted, most buyers held on. Some out of hope, others out of stubbornness, and a few because walking away meant accepting a loss too large to bear. The AMG One became more than a car. It was a test of faith, a wager on the limits of what technology and a brand's word could deliver. Each owner's story, written in receipts and unanswered emails, traced the human cost of ambition colliding with reality. Official statements from Mercedes-AMG rarely hinted at the depth of the problems beneath the surface. Instead, the company's messaging leaned on words like refinement and perfection, casting each delay as a step toward engineering excellence rather than a sign of trouble. Press releases described the AMG One's development as a journey of continual improvement, with engineers fine-tuning the world's most advanced powertrain and pushing the boundaries of what is possible. Each setback was reframed as a learning opportunity. In public, the tone remained unwavering. The car would deliver on its promise, no matter how long it took. Behind closed doors, the mood was less certain. By 2022, the gap between the official story and internal reality had grown too wide to ignore. Ola Källenius, Mercedes' chief executive, offered a rare moment of candor when he told reporters, "I think we were drunk when we approved this project." The remark, half joking but entirely revealing, cut through the usual corporate optimism. It acknowledged what engineers and executives had wrestled with for years. The AMG One was a bet on technology that barely belonged on public roads. The company's public relations playbook called for optimism, but the facts were harder to spin. The original promise of 2019 deliveries had slipped again and again, with each new timeline accompanied by another round of carefully worded updates. In official communications, Mercedes described the delays as necessary refinements to ensure the car met the highest standards of performance and reliability. The language was polished, but the reality was raw. The car's Formula One-derived heart was fundamentally at odds with emissions laws, noise regulations, and the day-to-day demands of street driving. The AMG One's struggles did not stop at technical hurdles. In the United States, buyers received a letter in 2022 stating that Mercedes would not deliver the car there at all. The company cited regulatory challenges and explained that certifying the AMG One for U.S. roads would have meant compromising its performance and character. The decision left American customers with deposits in limbo and no road-legal car to show for it. The ban was never announced with fanfare. It was disclosed quietly, buried in direct correspondence rather than broadcast in press releases. Mercedes' leadership walked a tightrope between pride and damage control. The official narrative celebrated the AMG One's Nürburgring record and its status as the only true Formula One engined road car. At the same time, executives avoided direct answers about why the project had taken so long or why some markets were left out entirely. The result was a public image carefully managed by press statements and executive soundbites, an image that glossed over the doubts and frustrations simmering just beneath the surface. A cold morning at the Nürburgring. The Mercedes-AMG One rolls out of the paddock, its 1.6-liter V6 humming alongside the whir of electric motors. This is no ordinary test. The goal, to prove beyond words and press releases that 5 years of struggle could buy a place in the record books. Under the carbon fiber shell, a combined 1,063 horsepower waits to be unleashed. The hybrid system, once the source of endless headaches, now works in concert. Front axle motors vectoring torque, the MGUH spinning the turbo without delay, the battery humming at its ideal 50-degree window. Every detail is calibrated for this single lap. Factory driver Mauro Engel takes the wheel. The track is dry, the air crisp, and the car is set to Race Plus mode. Suspension drops by nearly 4 centimeters, activating the most aggressive aerodynamic profile. The start-finish straight blurs past as the AMG One accelerates, its Formula One derived engine screaming to 11,000 revolutions per minute before each upshift. In the high-speed sweepers, the front motors pull the car out of corners with silent force, while the V6 delivers a soundtrack more at home in Monaco than on German tarmac. Engel manages energy deployment with the precision of a race engineer. He balances battery output and hybrid boost, knowing that every second counts over the 20.8-kilometer circuit. The challenge is not just outright speed, but keeping the powertrain within its narrow thermal and electronic limits. Too much heat, and the software will cut power. Too little, and the tires lose grip. Each sector passes in a blur of telemetry and instinct. The AMG One's brakes harvest kinetic energy, feeding the battery for the next straight. The hybrid system, once prone to limp mode and error codes, now delivers seamless thrust with surgical precision. As the car crosses the line, the stopwatch stops at 6 minutes, 29.090 seconds. For the first time, a road-legal production car laps the Nürburgring in under 6.5 minutes. The AMG One shaves 8 seconds off the previous record, cementing its place at the pinnacle of performance. The achievement is more than a number. It is the sum of every compromise, every delay, every sleepless night in a Falterbach and Brixworth. The promise of Formula One technology for the street, once doubted by engineers and owners alike, is now written into the asphalt of the world's most demanding circuit. The AMG One's record lap is not just a technical triumph, it is the payoff for a journey that nearly broke the boundaries of what a road car can be. Mercedes set out to make Formula One technology street legal and expose the brutal gap between racing dreams and real-world rules. Today, even as hybrid supercars dominate headlines, the AMG One's struggle proves that not every innovation survives outside the arena it was built for. The limits of engineering ambition aren't just technical, they are regulatory, ethical, and public. Every promise to rewrite the future now faces the same question: at what cost? Drop your thoughts in the comments below.